The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process. Julie Herndon is a San Francisco-based composer, performer, and sound artist. Her work explores the body's relationship to tools like musical instruments and personal technologies. Her electroacoustic work has been described as blended to inhabit a surprisingly expressive space and truly brilliant and utterly affected. Davor Vincze is a composer of contemporary music and artistic director of Novalis Festival, whose artistic focus lies on meta-reality and musical narrative that is implicitly stated or explicitly concealed. On today's episode, we listen to excerpts from To Fight or Surrender, a pair of audiovisual operas directed by Heinrich Horwitz and performed by the Decoder-Ensemble, with soloists Jessica Aszodi and Nina Gao, released on the Infrequent Seams record label.
I think depending on the piece, like you said, the creative process looks a little differently. But for at that time, it really started with the text. And I had autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, which I really fell in love with the first chapter several years ago and kind of made a sketch of a piece about it. And I knew I wanted to come back to it. So I had this novel, and it was going through the text and finding these different bits that really resonated and really sounded like music. Like I could hear how they needed to sound. Mm-hmm. Kind of like pulling different fragments out of the text, and then starting to sing it and play with my harmonium and find these different ways that the phrases kind of fell and find pivot points between the different fragments, because there's a lot of things that happen in this book that maybe are harder to make music from.
Sure.
So really it was a very word-based beginning, and not just the content, but also singing it and seeing how it felt to actually make music with it.
Are you often inspired by text? Is that something like a non-musical thing like text? Does that normally inspire you, or does it depend?
I think song inspires me. So if I read something, I don't necessarily think of music automatically, right. But a lot of times I will write music that has words that go with it. So song and sound, to me, words and sound they do go together. But I think working with a found text was new for me, using this is an author. This isn't like I used an email for a piece one time, or like using text you kind of find is really different. And like using this is like a text by a writer, and that kind of like respect that you have to pay to it was a different experience.
Yeah, because with an email, I mean, it's such a casual form of communication. We often don't think like, this like sacred document is an email somebody sent me, but somebody's, biography or memoir could hold a lot of meaning.
Yeah, right.
So, Davor, where does the creative process begin for you?
I'm going to talk specifically about this piece. So I actually started thinking about it like 10 years ago. But then about 5 years ago, I met with an acquaintance who became a friend of mine, Alexander Hutkono. And he was just studying at a time libretto writing at Guildhall in London. And then I kind of gave him a bunch of ideas that I wanted to have for my opera. And he really formed it into a very original story that, talks about this whole ambivalence that I think we're kind of like daily experiencing with this idea that we have the big corporations like selling these magically looking products, and there's like a lot of stuff happening behind that nobody's informed, and then there's always these scandals that come out. And so like a lot of it was kind of put into that. And then when I more concretely started working on this whole process, then I think the whole pandemic played a huge role, because we had to shift from live performance to the video format, which also influenced a lot of the decision making. So I think first decision making was a little bit similar to what Julie was saying, in the sense that like, okay, how do you organize? We couldn't present the whole opera. My still hope is that, one day I will kind of like expand this. I mean, the opera project is closed in and of itself. Like, it stands as is. It's not like, oh, this is a chapter of, this is now, so, but for the purposes of that, we kind of had to narrow the story, and we kind of took out certain characters that are going to come out in the full version. And then it was like, okay, how much text do we need? And Alex was constantly saying less is more, which I totally agree. Because the time to read a poem is not the time to sing a song. Mm-hmm. And I'm super happy that he was very, very flexible in kind of like saying, okay, we'll just have an aria. And so that was kind of like the central part. And then I also had this melody that I created, and I like also how Julie was talking about songs. I also love songs. And there was like this song that I created then that is being used in this opera. We hear it in the potion as this kind of a little bit twerp, distorted thing that is at the same time pretty but kind of rugged. And that's, I guess, where I started, and then the aria, and then there was like all of these boxing scenes that started emerging, like this very aggressive parts that came then towards the end. And then we also had a great director, Heinrich Horwitz. Mm-hmm. They did just a lot of input in terms of like the visuals, who are not part of this CD, but one can also view the video versions. And there's a lot of connections, and she like played a lot with the hands, and also the cover design that you have by Irma Markulin kind of like overlaps two scenes from both of our visual works, where these hands kind of like unite, or they fight or surrender, or however you want to interpret it. Yeah. So that's all the visuals were kind of like the shared elements from the visuals are also thanks to a common director that we had for both operas.
Yeah, that's very true. Heinrich had a big impact on the pieces, and for my piece, at least sonically as well, in how things were in the piece No Writing that you mentioned, how the text was spoken and the attitude of it. It is maybe appropriate for this podcast, particularly because it's kind of a movement about the creative process and the writer's block, and kind of Gertrude Stein trying to write through her writer's block, or that happened at a certain point. And it was actually from everybody's autobiography, which she wrote after Alice's autobiography. And the writer's block that came from basically getting famous and feeling a lot of pressure and struggling a lot with how to kind of write again. But so it starts with Alice typing. So we think maybe this is Alice saying I was no longer writing, which is true of her life, that she was giving up her own voice as a writer in a way to support Gertrude. And then we find Gertrude speaking, I was not writing, which it is her story at this point that she isn't writing. And then the different voices in the ensemble are saying it in that way that you kind of, when something is ping-ponging around your head and you just hear, it's like kind of echoing and you're not really going anywhere new. You're kind of like spinning your wheels and bouncing around the same things, and it's just ping-ponging around. So there's a little bit of that kind of murmuring of voices that aren't really taking you anywhere else. They're just regurgitating.
Nothing inside me needed to be written. Nothing needed any word, and there was no word inside me that could not be spoken. And so there was no word inside me. I was not writing. I began to worry about identity. I'd always been I, because I had words that had to be written inside me. I had written and I was writing them. And now, any word I had inside could be spoken. Inside needed. It did not need to be written. I am I, because my little dog knows me.
Nothing needed any
But was I when I had no written word inside me?
So there was no word inside me.
I sometimes thought I would try. But to try is to die. And so I did not really try.
Speaking of texts that really stood out to me, I really loved the 8th track. And Davor, maybe you can talk a little bit about this phone call.
These kind of voices are a part of a technique that's called concatenative sound synthesis. And that, what it does, it kind of like takes little bits of chunks of the words, and it kind of like assembles them together. So what I was doing is like, I had a lot of, we had a lot of takes with Nina Guo, who was singing and was also acting and saying that. So she was also spoke all the lines for the other side we don't hear. And then when you do this technique, there's a lot of mismatching sometimes. So what I was basically doing is like, I was giving it the target, the sentence it was supposed to match, and then it would concatenate oftentimes with a lot of errors, that voice, and then I put a few filters over it. So you kind of like, that's why you sort of get it and you don't get it.
Right. Yeah.
And the second point that I wanted to connect to is also like similarly to Julie's opera, we are also kind of like, there's one person that's never really appearing. That's fun. The kind of like person that's so also another interesting connection. But yeah, this particular part of the phone call was done in such a way. And then there's like a little bit of a static noise that was also taken from, because we were recording in a basement of a building. And so I was like also kind of like equalizing out certain like kind of like noisy aspects of that room to kind of get that just like tension, you know, that person is there and you hear it as though you're standing kind of next to Nina and you catch a word or two, but you don't get the whole sentence. In a way, that was the point of it.
But you can still kind of infer the meaning or the intention behind the sort of cacophonied voice. You're getting the sense of what the other like the urgency that the other person has on the phone about, you need to do this. This person is going to die. You have to, yeah. You have to apply that Xinsheng. Yeah, and I think that's what was so beautifully written by Alex. Actually was like his idea that it would actually hide the voice. Like he wrote all these sentences, but wrote them like in brackets and said like, I think it will work the best. Like it's kind of like boring phone calls, like get like very easily boring when you just like have like two sides. And I think there's something enigmatic. And again, it emphasizes this ambiguousness that I'm playing with a lot in the whole opera, that we don't really get to hear what the other one is saying, but you notice by the intensity of the voice and everything that there's something that has to be done quickly.
What? I'm not doing it, Fan. Me? Kill him? You put him in that ring. We'll create another monster. Why do you care? It's just another boxer. Fun. Are you in love with him? Can't believe this. So I have to break all the laws so that you can have it your way. Yeah, well, there's no time to waste, but you know that saving him with Xinsheng is worse than letting him die.
If he dies, I'll never talk to you again.
Hello?
There's this zeitgeist that people are making things in conversation with the technology that's there, in conversation with the society they're in. And we have this attachment to like our ideas or our inventions. And I think as humans, we need that. And it also is really linked to survival and monetizing things and selling things and feeling ownership over intangible things. But as, you know, because composers are talking about music, I think as composers, it's even more tricky because we work so closely with performers and with directors and with you know, venues and things like that, that
engineers, producers,
totally and that all these things imprint a piece and the way it's maybe recorded or presented in video or presented in sound, that we lose, you know, our idea has become so impressioned by all the things that touched it on the way to someone who hears it.
So then is it really your invention then? Yeah.
Right. Is it, can you even have like my idea? Like, is there such a thing as my idea? because we do have ideas. And I think many times we all have the same ideas, and then we go about executing them very differently. So I think what it maybe comes down to is you can own how you execute an idea, but you kind of can't own the idea, because we all have them and they're cheap and they come and they go. But how I realize it and how hard I work on it might very much differ from the way that you realize it and the way that you work on it. And so that's how maybe I think the ownership comes in. Maybe we don't own our ideas, but we own our process around them and our labor, our time.
I completely agree with the Julie, and I always find kind of saddens me to a point is the way that people get to forget, to acknowledge certain things when working in collaboration, and also this human need to kind of like find that one person that, I don't know, I don't know if it's some kind of our innate, how would I say, caveman brain or something, but to have that leader, right? Like everybody's like now Elon Musk. I mean, like the day has 24 hours. Like he can work 10% more, 15% more, but he can't work. Like he's not. He didn't go into extra dimensions and buy himself 5 hours more out of a day to be receiving all that accolades for a lot of work that other people are doing for him. So I think that that's where I feel that it's important not to forget. I'm super grateful. I'm super grateful to Julie for there's been so much work to be organized around this whole CD. I'm thankful to Heinrich, to Decoder, to Nina, who's saying, to everyone who put James, Caddy, all of the people who I'd really like to point all of them out. I mean, all of this would not be possible without any of them. And and Alex and Gertrude indirectly, right, Julie? So it's kind of I just think it's important to stay humble, because as Julie pointed, we all have ideas and they come and go, and just maybe our approach to work is what then makes the end result. But I think other people kind of co-own a part of these ideas and projects that we did, especially for this city, right?
We have a lot of stories, especially in composition, and some are healthier than others, but we have a lot of stories and a lot of personalities who are these singular people who were, started a school of thought or a way of composing, or even how Julie was saying, a process that they have. So why do you think, and maybe it's not just particular to music, but why do you think we have these stories of the one person who paved the way, or the one person, and we don't have more stories about groups of people? Maybe it's human nature that we really like a hero story, or and it could also be something that is maybe has changed with time, where we are more connected with technology. We have more tools. We have more people working on projects. It's not just like Beethoven showing up with the orchestra and telling everybody how stupid they are and getting them to do it the way that he wants it done. Right. There's many moving parts, and we're also more aware of them. And I think that is a good thing. But I don't know if maybe it was just as complicated then, and that was just maybe written out of it or something. Yeah. Or maybe not complicated is the right word, but just as multifaceted. Just as a much part of the process, that there was Beethoven, but then there was all the other people that were part of that as well. But for some reason that gets written out, or that just wasn't what the writers or the storytellers decided to focus on.
Yeah, and maybe it has to do with the way that, our perception works. For the sake of simplifying, we receive at any point so much information, like visual, olfactory, senses, sound. like I think that we tend to like to put things in drawers in a way, like,
Sure.
oh, this is this, like, and I think that's somehow nice to see that with this new generation, and also this whole talk about gender fluidity and and non-binary, and for example, Heinrich is very strong advocate of that. She is also one of the people who spoke up as a German director and actor about there was this kind of like collective coming out. And I think that it's interesting what's happening. I think that we're starting to think about things a little bit more malleable, where things can occupy two drawers, partial time, and I think that kind of maybe will with time get us away from this mythos about a genius and this one, like, just like class.
Yeah, and all the hierarchy of the genius hands down the sacred scrolls to the hoi polloi, and they play this genius's work, and it's so today. I hand a musician a piece of music, and they're like, you can't write this, or like, try this, like, do that, let's move this, let's change this, and I'm like, oh, that's fantastic, that's so much more intuitive, and it just comes from somebody sitting with an instrument for their entire life. Like, they're just going to know things that I just, will never know. And so even just like taking away this idea that, well, what I write is this, do it, but I think there's still a lot of that.
Well, even if we reverse your kind of a question, is like, I've been in situations where the ensemble was exactly that kind of ensemble that just loves to, receive your input. And then like one situation where, I was explaining somebody that I'm now thinking like, oh, actually this sounds better and I'm going to change it. Yeah. And then the person says like, but in the score, it says this and this. I'm like, but I'm telling you now to change it. Yeah, but in the
That's
score,
against the rules. That's against the rules. Yeah.
I just was going to agree that it seems like the goal many times is a conversation and not just like an imposing of will. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing your time and your opinions with us. Let's take a moment here before I let you go. Where can we go to find out more about To Fight or Surrender, as well as just about both of you and your music?
Maybe the best place to find out more about To Fight or Surrender is the Infrequent Seams Bandcamp page. Mm-hmm. They have many awesome albums on there, and To Fight or Surrender, the video version and the audio version is there. To find out about us personally, maybe website is a nice thing, and mine is julieherndonmusic.com.
Yeah, and as far as my music goes, since Julie already said where the best place is to find out more about the CD is db-vincze.com, and you can find more there, or go to SoundCloud page. You just type my name and you'll find that. I guess those are the best places. YouTube also.
Thanks to Julie and Davor for sharing their time and music with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes of the series, and as always, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.